I'm Jay Richards, and we are here at the COSM Technology Summit 2023 in Bellevue, Washington. And I'm joined by a friend, John Tamny, who is, you may know him from Forbes magazine, from Real Clear Markets. Actually, he's got a new organization called the Parkview Institute, but he is here tonight at COSM because he's going to be on a panel talking with George Gilder. John, good to see you.
Well, likewise, great to see you, Jay.
Okay, so you guys are going to be talking about the information theory of economics. I mean, what are you planning on saying tonight?
Well, my goal with it is to elicit the crucial points from the book.
Mm-hmm.
I read it, as I'm sure you did. It's a
Yeah.
great book. And I want to make sure, I think there's a tendency, people hear the information theory of the economy and think, well, what on earth could that mean?
Yeah.
But the way it's conveyed in the book is very important. And so probably the question that I'll start out with is he talks about earlier in the book, when you put your credit card into a gas pump and start pumping the gas, you're not pumping gasoline. Gasoline has been around for millions of years, billions of years realistically. What you're doing is pumping information. As information, as knowledge grows, that we get better at mastering the world around us on the way to enormous advances. And so I want to make sure to basically so that people can understand the importance of the book, to try to direct things at George that cause him to bring out vividly the most important aspects of the book.
Yeah, because George very often speaks and writes kind of aphoristically, and so, I mean, the way I put this point, because it's, I mean, even the way you put it, right? People say, well, no, that's a physical resource, a material thing, but, well, actually, gasoline, purified gasoline, you don't find that. What you find is crude. You actually have to know how to refine it. You actually have to technology that uses it, a way to transport it. Never originally any gas at a gas station. I mean, the fingerprints of human activity are absolutely all over that. And there's a physical substrate, of course, the hydrocarbons, but the human intelligence, right, is the major part of the story, even with something as physical as gasoline. And I think that's a key insight that George has been making, recapitulating in some ways and refining the thoughts of Julian Simon and others for decades. I just think it's one of the most important insights.
It is, and it's got to be conveyed that from these advances, from gasoline, what has that done? It's mechanized what used to be done by humans. It's mechanized immense amounts of human toil. And what's that done? It's freed the minds that always existed to actually develop this wealth, to develop the knowledge that is wealth. Without oil, when it was just sitting unused on Earth, we were poor, and we were poor precisely because a lack of knowledge about what the Earth provided limited the ability of people to develop their minds. It's got to be stressed, and I try to stress over and over again, that the tractor is arguably the biggest job destroyer in history.
Yeah, sure.
Because it used to be that all of human endeavor was directed toward the creation of food. And so once you destroyed all those jobs, you didn't put people out of work. You freed them to once again develop what's up here and to develop the world around us on the way to just enormous leaps in wealth creation.
And that's important, especially right now. Of course, at the conference, the theme this year is generative or degenerative AI, in which, of course, a lot of people are saying this is going to destroy lots of jobs. Well, in a sense, of course, it's going to displace a lot of jobs.
It doesn't mean anything if it doesn't.
Yeah.
What is technology but job destruction, or basically an amplification of one's skills?
Yeah.
Let's hope if it doesn't destroy lots of jobs, then
Why
we're
would we
wasting
bother?
our time.
Yeah.
We should be doing something else. We should be focusing on something else here.
Yeah.
And so it's got to be stressed that what enables the division of labor is the path to enormous leaps in productivity. You go back to Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations. One man working alone in a pin factory, he observed when he visited a pin factory, could maybe produce one pin a day. But several men working together in specialized fashion could produce tens of thousands. And so you think about, what if machines can start not just doing for us, but thinking for us? When you stack that knowledge and you combine it with human knowledge, the future is staggering for its brilliance, precisely because, what is it, Vinod Khosla says, AI is going to remove human effort, 80% of human effort from 80% of jobs.
Yeah.
And, oh my gosh, what are we? Can you imagine how good we would be if we could focus on the 20%
Absolutely.
we're best at,
Yeah.
and machines would do the rest?
Yeah. We
all-
still are going to have our comparative advantage.
Yeah, we're,
right?
we're just going to be amazing.
Yeah.
We're going to have the advantages. It's going to lift us in ways. It's going to turn a society that's full of a lot of average people into a lot of average people who are amazingly productive.
Well, I mean, something that I think most people don't know. So everybody sort of worries, okay, well, you got to learn coding, right? This is the sort of myth a few years ago. Don't tell people, well, you can learn to code. What we're talking about here is with these large language models, we're getting close to the point where people will be able to program using regular language, writing English sentences that actually program. This is something no one anticipated. And so, of course, what you're saying is there's jobs destroyed based on what we're doing here, and that's going to open up new opportunities that didn't exist before. What people always imagine is a sort of lump of labor. All they see is what's lost. They can't imagine what's gained. And if you don't have a kind of historical perspective on this, you really don't quite understand what economic innovation and growth even looks like.
No. And to be fair, of course people can't see what's ahead. If they could see what's ahead, they'd be billionaires.
Absolutely.
But what we know is that what's ahead is going to be amazing.
Yeah.
That's what frees people up to do the things that they couldn't do in the past. And so you have to hope that the tomorrow, if it's what they say it's going to be, it's really going to be staggering for its brilliance. It's going to, I write all the time that there are no stupid people and there are no lazy people. At the same time, a slow economy suffocates a lot of genius. And so if it's true that AI can basically elevate workers in ways they've never been elevated before, the ability of people to showcase brilliance that they couldn't in the past is stunning. I mean, again, if you and I had been born 175 years ago, I can at least say for me, I would have been an embarrassment.
Yeah.
Because nothing about what I'm good at has anything to do with the farm. And so thank goodness we were born when we were born. And so
Absolutely.
you look at it now, it's so interesting to go on vacation. You'll see people on vacation at fancy hotels covered in tattoos. What do they do? Oh, they're chefs. Well, see, 30 years ago, chef was a loser job.
Yeah.
But in a specialized society, chef is a job that geniuses do, because we're finally at a stage that what you can do in the kitchen makes you a charismatic person. 30 years ago, it's signaling you're a loser. And so these advances that erase work.
In that case, and what's funny there is that, of course, people have been cooking for all of history. Right? But what it means to be a chef now is something different than what it meant even 30 years ago.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what's fascinating to think about is that there are jobs today that we don't even consider as jobs, or that we look as last resort things that in this future are going to be seen in the way we look at chefs today. We kind of look at them and think, wow, such charisma.
Yeah.
This is going to elevate all sorts of skills that again, we don't know about right now.
No, that's right. And I've talked about what I call bespoke labor jobs, that we could have a scenario in which people are at Costco buying hydroponically grown, drone-supervised Boston Bib lettuce. You can do this in D.C., but you also go to a farmer's market because it gives you a kind of different product. Okay, I want this kind of specialized produce that's grown 10 miles from my house.
Absolutely.
I know the person, and that's the subjective theory of economic value. You value these things differently than when you're right at the level of subsistence farming, right? It's a completely different thing. So, but I mean, we are at a moment in the U.S., in the world, there's a lot of bad stuff happening, and so I think we're sort of in a cultural funk at the moment where we are all looking at the glass half empty rather than the glass half full. And so that's what I always appreciate about your work, is that you focus on the sort of human possibility. And I do think your understanding of the human person is really decisive here. I mean, look, if you're a materialist and you think humans are just sort of glorified apes, right? You're going to have a particular sort of view of the future. If you think we're creatures made in the image of God to create, that's going to give you a different perspective on the future.
It's interesting. There's a tendency in all this to say that times have never been worse, and but remember, they always say that.
Yeah.
You look back to, people are so pessimistic now, and I think, well, wow, what if they'd come of age in the 1920s or 1930s?
Yeah.
You had the Great Depression, then you had Hitler, then you had World War II.
Yeah.
You had somewhere in there the Armenian genocide, and then the full Holocaust, and then after that you had Korea. gosh, are we lucky today that we think the times of the present are so bad. They're so microscopic relative to the past. And so I think the other exciting thing is that if you look at what has people worried right now, if this were a conference full of people from the left, they'd be saying that the earth is warming.
Yeah.
And that's what we should be worried about.
And
I wasn't here for it, but I heard that there were some people here talking about, oh, well, we're not having enough babies. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking, God, we must be the richest society. What an amazingly advanced society we are, that we can waste time on two things like that. Oh, a warming earth, when throughout history, a cold earth was what killed so many people because we didn't know how to master that. And then not enough babies? So that's the fear. The babies being born today, for all the reasons that we've just discussed, are going to be the equivalent of thousands of babies born in the past in light of their ability to produce. With this technology that basically is going to, what did they say, that the discovery of coal was the equivalent of giving every worker 20 full-time assistants? Well, so what will AI, what will all this mechanization of thought and activity mean for every human on Earth? It's going to make us superhuman in terms of our capacity to produce. And so birth rates, that's all our side can come up with in terms of the worries. Again, we must be doing amazingly well that such smart people can waste such immense amounts of time on things that are so pointless and not germane to what the future is going to be.
I actually do think the demographic crisis is a big deal, but that's another subject. And so I'm not going to, we won't go down that rabbit trail. Yeah, that's exactly. But I do want to end this because with the point that you and I both survived COVID. But you and I were both early dissenters on COVID. We had interviews pulled off of YouTube, right? And are you worried about, I mean, this is something that I'm worried about, is the use of technology, which I assumed 20 years ago is going to be liberating, to narrow and control and censor thought. I mean, I think this is a real problem, and I think both of us have experienced it directly.
I don't worry about that because capitalism and information always outruns governments. They say in China today that if you go on the computer, you can't find out about Tiananmen Square. Oh, please. If you know anything about computers in China, you can find out everything you want to know on the internet. And my view has always been, even during the lockdowns, to censor is to amplify. I never had so much information in my life as during the lockdowns about why they were wrong. I would argue, and I argued in my book, When Politicians Panic, buy several copies.
Very good.
No, but I made the point. I made the point in that without the New York Times, it would have been much less of a book. The New York Times had all these scary headlines, but you read into the articles, and they were pointing out what guys like you and me were pointing out. The information was in there, and so
that's right.
I think that. I don't think that they can hide this. I think it's going to be more and more difficult to hide what's going on. I didn't feel censored during the lockdowns, and I didn't feel censored simply because if they did that, somehow it was getting to us. Somehow those of us who wanted to know these things were getting the information. We could find it, and we did, and we're going to get better and better at that.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I always had to remind myself of that. We wrote The Price of Panic, did all the research online. There'd be some amazing scientific article get published. We found it because we were sort of trolling for it, but I would watch Google bury it in 72 hours so that if you didn't know the name of the article, it would disappear. On the other hand, I had access to it. In the former Soviet Union, I mean, unless you're passing around mimeographed copies of documents, you would have had access to the information. So it's good to remember both those dynamics are happening at the same time.
Yeah. No, it's a good world, and we've got to always. I think we too easily forget all the good things that are happening. My bigger concern is that I don't have to tell you, if the virus starts spreading in the year 2000, there's no way there's lockdowns, and we know why there's no lockdowns, simply because a lot of rich people would have lost their jobs. They couldn't sit at home and watch Tiger King in between orders from the subhumans bringing them food all the time. But don't touch us when you bring us the food. The ability for the elite to basically hide from reality for months at a time and basically take a break on someone else's dime was impossible. And so what I fear in this big zoom upward of technology, and believe me, I'm for it, I'm always for progress, is that it's going to make it easier and easier for government to say, oh, hey,
Yeah.
just go disappear. That's the downside, or government to try to take our freedom without as powerful of economic effects. But the upside to it is we are way too fast for government. And in a sense, you saw that in 2020. They tried to take away our freedom, and we kicked their ass. We kicked their ass informationally.
Yeah.
We continued to produce. We figured out a way. They can't control us. And you look back to when Joe Biden said, hey, you guys, if you want to have, maybe some barbecues with close family members this year, you can do that for 4th of July. It's like, oh, please. We were doing that the whole time.
Absolutely.
And you look back to California in the summer of 2020 when they shut down the fireworks.
Yes.
And remember the big middle finger from the Californians
Yes.
having fireworks
Absolutely.
shows throughout the city of Los Angeles. You do not take away the freedom of the American people. They learned it. They can't ever do it again, I think, as a consequence.
I hope that's right. I hope that at this point we've learned our lesson and we are not compliant the next time they try it.
We can't be.
Absolutely. John Tamny, good to see you.
Thanks, Jay. Appreciate it.
And thank you for joining us. I'm Jay Richards at COSM 2023.